Hey there, it's Gayle from BERNINA of Naperville, and I wanted to do a little quick but educational video for you today on morphing. Now, morphing is something that you can do on your BERNINA Q-matic, and there's even a morphing that you can do in your BERNINA embroidery software, but we're going to focus today on the morphing on our brand new BERNINA 790 Pro. So, what are we waiting for? Let's get to it.
Before we get started, what is morphing? You know, I think the technical definition of it is it's a feature that allows you to transform objects, outlines, and stitches in a variety of novel and interesting ways. I mean, some of us that watched MTV as kids, there was a popular video that showed one person morphing into another person. Well, it's a little bit different on our 770 Pros. Okay, and in the sewing industry. But our BERNINA 790 Pro has morphing under this new feature called four-point positioning. And those of you that have been using your BERNINAs in embroidery know about pinpoint precision or pinpoint positioning. Well, this is in that same genre, but it has a new little icon. And we're going to select the morph feature after we select the four-point positioning to set the boundary frame into which the embroidery design will be fitted. So what happens is your square quilting design or your rectangular design or whatever gets stretched and positioned to fill those 4 points that you create. All right, well, getting started here, I want to first explain a few things to you. So when you sit at your 790 Pro, when you're in embroidery mode, you're going to have fonts, your built-in embroidery designs, your stitches that you can turn into embroidery, and your heart where you keep embroidery designs that you're saving on the hard drive of your sewing machine. When we open our pre-installed designs, we're going to have multiple different choices here. One of them is in the hoop projects, like these cute little boxes and things like that. And also there is other designs, and we can explore those on another video. But if you noticed, when we open these designs, it says EXP. When they're more like regular embroidery designs, see how these say EXP? Those are your compressed versions of the embroidery file that are created when you either send a design to your machine, you purchase them from your favorite embroidery place, or you find them on your machine. Our number 2 folder is our BERNINA Q-matic files, or BQM. And these are special files because these are quilting files that you could take right over to your BERNINA Q-matic, your Q24 and all of that system. But these files are also on our 790, and they allow us to be able to enlarge and reduce these designs, and there's 8 pages worth of them here, infinitely. So why is this special, and how does this know, and how does it make everything perfect? Well, it starts in our gears. So if I go to my sewing gears, and I go to my little embroidery hoop, then in here we have a new icon, and this is the quilting stitch icon. So I'm going through my settings in my back end, and I'm setting my stitches per inch. That's what SPI means, stitches per inch, because that in the industry of long arm quilting is how you actually are picking your stitch length. So for instance, 14 is 14 stitches per inch. The default setting is 10 stitches per inch. Now we have quite a range on this. We can go all the way from 4 stitches per inch. That would be pretty long. That's like basting, right? All the way up to 24 stitches per inch. For what I'm doing in a lot of applications, I like 14 because I'm not really always making super large things, but this can be a personal preference for you, and this can also be something that you test out. In general, I like to think of the larger the motif in my hoop, the longer the stitches, or the shorter or smaller the design in my hoop, maybe I need a few more stitches per inch to get perfectly nice little round curves. So I'm going to keep my machine set at 14, and I'm going to go ahead and close this window, and I'm going to pick my design. And it really doesn't matter what we're going to pick at this juncture. Let's go ahead and pick design number 72. And design number 72 is what I used on the beautiful quilt that I emulated that Bernina International did. So this one was really fun to work with. Now, as you can see, I'm using my medium clamp hoop, and on this application, it comes into my hoop too large. Well, remember that thing I talked about, being able to make it, enlarge it, and reduce it, and no worries, right? So we're going to hit our enlarge and reduce icon. We're going to keep our proportional settings. That's what this little link button does. And I'm going to reduce the size. Now, while I'm reducing, I'm going to take the opportunity to talk to you a little bit about skewing versus morphing. So skewing is when, let's say I take this little link button that keeps, as I reduce it, both the length and the width at 85%. If I undo that link and now make my width independent of my length, this is skewing it because now I have something that is not proportionate anymore. It started off square, but now it's more of a rectangle. Another thing about skewing is you might be wanting to kind of squeeze something where, for instance, you have a border, you've gotten all the way around the quilt, except you've got this piece and this piece that's already quilted, but you're trying to fit this piece in. That's when we can go to our enlarge and reduce, remove our proportion lock, and now I'm just going to squeeze this together vertically and then move it into position to where it might look right. But I just wanted you to see that this is also maybe a use of skewing. And, we probably have to do a little bit more surgery on that one. But back to our other piece that we're actually morphing, we're going to need to reduce it in size. Setting my lock proportions, and now I'm going to go ahead and reduce this until it fits in the hoop. Now, of course, you know that with pinpoint placement, which is this icon right here, we've had the grid. And the grid basically just allows us to set a grid around here, and then what you would do is you would maybe pick the center of the design or the baseline of the design in the center based on where you've drawn a line on your actual work that's in the hoop. Then you can use your multi-function knobs to kind of align your piece where you need it to be, and then you would hit set, and that glues that spot right to where you need it in your hoop. Then looking down at your hoop again at maybe some drawn reference lines or a seam in your work, you select another dot on this grid, use your knob to kind of set it, and that kind of tilts your design or makes it more in alignment with maybe a straight line you drew on your work and you didn't hoop it straight. That's fine, that's wonderful. But now we have this new feature. So I'm going to hit the eye in my breadcrumbs right here, hit pinpoint placement again, and I want to show you this 4-point positioning icon. Now we have two choices. We've got this 4-point positioning, which is just going to center a design within 4 points that you select, or morph. And that's what the little weird shaped one is for. There's no set button in this option because we're going to touch one of our corners. We're going to move the little dot to where we want it to be in reference to a seam or a corner. And you might not need to move all of them, but on my circular quilt that you see, I actually moved about all 4 corners each time because sometimes my design is way too big when I'm doing this, but it doesn't matter. So you move your like 4 points like this, and you can see how this is skewed. And then all you have to do is stitch it out, and it will be morphed, and hopefully it will fit in your area. While we're here, before we stitch it out, there's also this option, and this is a margin. When you touch this button, it takes your design that you just morphed 1/8 of an inch in from your seam line or those corners that you set. And I like to use this button because sometimes, if you don't get it quite to the edge, it looks great. Sometimes if it goes right to the edge, you might get some stitching that goes over a seam and it doesn't look as good. So this one will kind of like really make you look like a pro, hence our 790 Pro. So this little guy goes all the way up to from 1/8 of an inch to 1.5 inches in. And there's other reasons why you might creatively want to use this, but these are the options that you have. Once you've set your morph, you can go ahead and stitch it out. Now there is also another new button on our 790 Pro when we're doing quilting in the hoop, and that's our quilting button. And what this does is it takes away superfluous jump stitches and cuts so that you can have a beautiful look on the top and the bottom of your work. And it's perfect for quilting because we want our quilting designs to look just as pretty on the back as on the front. So let's talk about another thing that you might want to experiment with. So there's a design, I love this one, I think it's cute, but it doesn't morph very well because the machine, when we go to morph, is thinking that the corners are kind of up here in Imaginaryville, you see, like this. So if I pick a corner and I squeeze it together like this, it's, who knows that it's being morphed, right? So what I like to do, going into my breadcrumbs, I'm going to go to my rotate icon, and we're going to rotate this like 45 degrees. Then I can go back over into my pinpoint placement, 4-point positioning, and morph, and now look what happens. Now we're getting something that looks more like what we might be looking for. And that's simply because designs that are kind of filled all the way to a 4-sided object just naturally morph better. Now, when we talk about things that you can morph, the best practice for morphing is to use it with your Bernina 790 Pro's built-in BQM files or other BQM files that you might purchase. OESD.com, they have some BQM files that you might enjoy. If you try to morph a design that's not BQM, your project may not come out exactly as you wish, so always do a test piece if you're experimenting. So now let's talk about morphing 2 separate items. So sometimes, like if you look at my little example over here on the right, sometimes I can fit 2 things in my hoop at the same time. And so I like to just set 2 things, push my button and go, and then, do other things while I'm embroidering. So if you can fit 2 or more areas that you want to morph in a large hoop at the same time, you may want to morph 2 separate items. So this requires that you actually draw on your work, and you can see my original chalk lines on this piece because I'm going to do something and show you actually how to do this. However, what I want you to know is that I'm giving you, I put like a little file in with this because it's had a hard time to simulate this without my little dummy file. I'll explain. But you basically are going to select the first item to morph and follow your morphing instructions. Then you select the next item to morph and follow those instructions. So let's get at it. So the first thing I'm going to do is this little guy here, this little light pink thing that you're seeing is a file I made to only represent to you the 2 items that I'm morphing in the hoop. okay? So you're not going to have this. This is literally just for visual. So I'm going to add that I want to morph in here. And remember, the best ones to choose are ones that are square-like here, okay? So then when we go in, we're going to add another, we're going to morph this design first. And I'm picking my 4-point positioning and morph is selected. So now I'm going to touch this. And you might notice that the bottom layer disappeared in my design. And that's why it's important to not use your embroidery designs as a guide for placement. You have to physically mark on your fabric your lines, because I'm moving this dot per where my needle is going in reference to my hoop. Okay, so there's like my design, right? It's not perfect, but remember, that was just like a little shadow for you to show you like kind of what I'm doing on my fabric here. Then you would add another design, pick your pinpoint placement and your 4-point positioning and your morphing, and follow the same procedure with these. It's kind of the idea of what that looks like in reference, and obviously like this isn't staying within the margins, blah, 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 but I just wanted to show you that is how I worked on this application by using my little drawn lines there. Now, you also might want to make something like this, where we have several grouped items together that create this. And I used endless embroidery for this easy duplication. And it allows us to really play around with making these nice gradiating wishbones. So let's have a look at this. So in this application, we're going to find like a design like those wishbones, or maybe these guys here, like this one. And what I want to do with this first is I'm going to change to my maxi hoop, and I'm going to rotate this. And I'm going to rotate it 90 degrees and 90 degrees and 90 degrees. So my little leaves are floating up per se. And now what I want to do is take my endless embroidery, which is this butterfly button here. And I'm going to deselect those little anchor points because I'm not actually using this for endless embroidery. And I'm going to put 3 designs in the hoop. Then I'm going to click a lot on here because I want this to read something like -60 here, because this is where I'm able to take that ending and line it up right there where it connects to the other one. So hold please. We could also click this button, but then what that does is it makes my whole design smaller, but I just want to push them together. So that's why I'm just going to click. And I am using the BERNINA simulator on this, so it's a little clunkier than my actual machine. So keep that in mind, please. All right, 51.5 looks like it did the trick. And I'm going to say OK. And now I'm just going to use my enlarge reduce button with my proportion lock in place and reduce the size until I don't see that red out of bounds ring around my hoop. So now we would go over to our pinpoint placement and our 4-point positioning and our morph, and we would take our pieces and work them how we want them to be in our hoop. And obviously, the more of these we put in the hoop, the denser this kind of stitching is going to be. And once you kind of get it moved to where you need to go, You're going to follow all of those things that we did before, and you're going to follow all of those setup instructions like we did before and stitch it out.
All right, what do you think? Pretty cool, pretty easy, right? Well, if you want to see more tutorials like this one or other fun kind of stuff, don't forget to check out our Bernina of Naperville YouTube channel. It's easy. It's youtube.com/Bernina of Naperville, and there you can like, comment, and subscribe. Happy morphing.